Hello everyone and welcome to Fairy Oasis. My name is Lillian and I enjoy miniatures, especially dollhouse miniatures, which will become entirely relevant very shortly. I've had a project rattling around in my head and I've wanted to do it for years. And I do mean years. Every year I think about doing it. And I think about how amazing it would be to do it for the holidays. And then something comes up, or I'm just too busy, or I don't have the supplies, and it doesn't happen. But not this year. This year, I'm doing it. So now I present to you the adventure with all its bumps and obstacles of creating a miniature holiday tree. I will also be using portions of this video as an opportunity to test out green screens. So enjoy whatever chaos that brings. It all started with a desire and an idea. There are plenty of holiday trees that you can get, but they aren't the kind you can actually go and hang ornaments on. At least not the ones I've seen. The ones I've seen with ornaments seem to have the ornaments permanently glued on. I love the idea of being able to decorate the tree or even have it partially decorated as an aspect of the scene. Now, I thought I could potentially achieve this by using a dowel rod, drilling holes into it and using pipe cleaners as the branches, setting each pipe cleaner branch into the little holes. I hadn't really thought the project out any further than that. It was basically just, I think this should work. An experiment waiting to be done. Now, at first, I thought I would be able to do this with the Dremel. I'm kind of excited about the idea of using the Dremel, and I didn't realize that Dremels, or at least the Dremel that is in the garage, does not have drill bits. Does not drill holes, so that was off the table. Next, I thought about using the drill. I was aware that there was a drill. However, the drill that we have is a little bit heavy, and I'm petite. I use an 8-ounce hammer. The drill is 3¼ pounds, and the idea of manhandling this drill and attempting to drill holes into a 1/4-inch curved surface held between two pieces of metal sounds like a bad idea waiting to happen. So I rummaged around the garage for a different idea of how to get the holes into my dowel rod. And I did manage to find some very thin nails. So I put a short piece of my 1/4-inch dowel rod into the table-mounted clamp, and I started hammering away, creating little holes, and it was doing well, at least in the beginning. Very quickly, though, it was becoming apparent that splitting might be a serious issue. And in fact, by the end of putting in all of the holes into this dowel rod, it had split, and it was not going to be usable unless I used something to adhere the whole thing together to keep it structurally sound, which didn't sound like a great idea. So I went back to the drawing board. I ended up making a second attempt, thinking that maybe I would use only a small section of dowel rod at the bottom as the exposed trunk, and then have a thicker wire up the center that I catch all of the branches in. But that didn't work out very well. The wire wasn't sturdy enough, and I didn't know how to catch the branches properly. Let's be honest, I don't know wire wrapping. I have some friends who could probably get this to work, but at least with the wire I had, it wasn't going anywhere good. So I took some time off and gave it some thought, and then I went back to rummage in the garage again. I came back to the drill bits, knowing that there was no way I was going to be able to safely use the drill, but I realized I can just use the tiniest drill bit to bore the holes into the dowel rod by hand. And so I tested that out, and it worked. I mean, it was a lot of effort, especially until I remembered that there's a screwdriver where the bit comes out of the screwdriver, and you can put different size screwdriver bit ends. I have no idea what those are called. I just know how to use them. But I realized it was possible that this drill bit would fit in there, and it did. And that made it so much easier on my hands. So I was off. I put so many holes in this thing, and I was so happy with it. I was so excited about getting this project off the ground. That brings us to the color. I'd gone down to the hardware store hoping to find a wood stain that would be the right color, and I looked up, I think possibly Douglas fir or something like that, bark, pine tree bark, one of those species of trees, and tried to match it. Espresso looked like it would do well, and so I brought it home, and I stained wood for the first time in years. It worked pretty well. I did end up having to go back and re-drill some of the holes because they hadn't been drilled deeply enough. But that's one of many things where I learned along the way. Now here is where one of the issues came in. Actually, several issues came up in this run. I had to make a lot of tree branches for that one. In fact, there were 73 separate holes in this tree trunk. I didn't end up gluing them all in. And in fact, when I got to the gluing part, like everything was taking so long, but the gluing, you can only glue in like 3 branches at a time, and then you have to wait, because if you keep putting more branches in while they're wet, you run the risk of accidentally pushing them out of position of where you want them. So it was a lot of set tree branches, go do something else and wait, because if I sit there, I'm definitely gonna mess with them. But by the time I'd gotten close to getting all of these tree branches in, which was several hours of work, I realized 2 things. One, there are too many holes and too many branches. This is not feasible, and I kind of don't like it. 2, the branches weren't really filling out the space. I'd made 2 separate kinds of branches. One of them were just these stick branches, just a straight branch. The other ones, which are made specifically for the top of the tree, are what I will be calling chicken foot branches. They've got like 3 prongs at the end of them. They look pretty good, especially at the top of the tree. The rest of the branches, not so much. These chicken foot branches, I realized, are gonna make my tree look much more voluminous, which is what I want. So I didn't end up gluing them all in before deciding I'm gonna do a new tree. I'm just going to start from the beginning. I'm going to put a reasonable number of branch holes, and we're going to try again with all chicken foot branches. So while I was doing all of this, I was also working on the stand. I'd originally thought of doing a little X of popsicle stick wood at the bottom, and in fact, I'd made that. Just cutting the popsicle stick so that it would create a flat X that I could glue the tree onto. But this really wasn't going to hold the tree in place. I knew that my tree was just gonna fall over, so back to the hardware store. I figured if I used a washer on top of the X, I would be able to keep it bottom heavy instead of top heavy. People at the hardware store are very helpful. Definitely support your local businesses. So I brought that home and I decided to prime both my wooden X and my washer, and immediately upon starting and noticing that my primer was doing that weird spreading thing that paint does when it's not going to stick to a surface, realized I needed to sand this before I did it. So I just went and washed all of the primer off of the metal washer and took it outside to sand it and just scuff it up real good. Then I primed it and it went great. The rest of this was very much along with creating the tree and the branches and a lot of steps where you have to wait. But this is the point where I'd kind of gotten a flow by this time. And so I had the new trunk filled with, I think it was about 44 holes, which was far more reasonable. Stained, and that had to dry for 24 hours, and I'd primed the stands, and that had to wait for 24 hours, which meant I got time to make chicken foot branches. And then by the time everything was dry, I had to make a coat of paint to go onto my stand. I knew I wanted it to be kind of that Christmas red or Christmas green, and I tried for the red first. We've got magenta, yellow, and cyan, and I realized I don't know how to mix these very well to get Christmas red, and that was not working. So I ditched that and rummaged through the paints and found, I believe it was a Kelly green or an apple green, something like that, and the silver that I use for my miniature paintings. And so I took some of the green and just put a drop of the silver in to give it that nice shimmer. Easy peasy, worked well. Put a coat on my stand portions and then let them dry, and then I had to glue them together, and then I had to give them another coat, and all of that happened over several hours as things had to dry. And I put all of the lovely branches into the tree, which all took quite a bit of time, but I have to say, it's a handful of days later, and I am still absolutely over the moon with this beautiful tree. It's just absolutely gorgeous, and I cannot wait to decorate it. And I'm so happy that I did it. All in all, the entire process, beginning to end, including all of the experimenting and failures and going back to the drawing board, took me exactly 3 weeks. But you know what? Those 3 weeks were worth it. I have a beautiful holiday tree that I can now put in any scene I want to put it in. If there's a project that you've been putting off, that you've been wanting to do, go for it. It doesn't even matter if you don't have a full plan, especially if you're trying to develop something new. Failure can lead to learning new things. Failure can give you this physical memory of, okay, this doesn't work, but this does. And sometimes when you fail, you're like, oh, well, this didn't do what I wanted it to do, but this does this other thing. Please, don't be afraid to try things. Go for it. Make art. Experiment. Life is so wonderful when we experiment. Ta-ta.